If you want to be a follower of Jesus, how do you know what's the correct way to go? Usually, we want to highlight someone who seems to have gone before us, someone who knows the road to come to Christ. Stay tuned. I'm going to tell you about a very special person that can offer us a light of how to come to Christ. Hello, my name is Father Mike Manning. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm delighted to come to you and share with you my experience of Jesus and how I hope that maybe the words that I say can give you a courage, can give you a sense of direction in your own life. I want to talk to you today about the importance of people to give us a direction, their example to help us to know how we can come to Christ. That's really what the Bible is all about, isn't it? It's a story of people who have encountered God, and we follow their story, whether it's Abraham or Moses or King David, even the apostles, and we understand them being called by Christ, and we say, yeah, I can try to relate to their situation, even though it was 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, but I can still know this will give me a direction in my own life. The importance of finding someone who has gone before us is like the idea of a person who wants to play baseball. Recently, I was going to a baseball game here in San Bernardino, and oh my, it was exciting to see the players play. We have a small ballpark, very enthusiastic and very good. But as I looked at these players, I was reading in the book about how they got on the team. So many of them are just struggling and struggling to try to make it into the majors. And what they do is they try to study someone who's a better player than they are. They'll look at it on television, they'll look at them playing live in games and watch how they bat and watch how they catch the ball and how they throw. And they'll try to imitate that. And in imitating that, kind of getting on the back of those people, they hope that maybe they'll start to be able to be the star that they wish that they were. We're all like that. We're all kind of wanting goals in our life and then looking for people that seem to go down that road in a successful way and saying, oh, let me follow that person, whether it's baseball or whether it's marriage or whether it's success in business, or whether it's a person who wants to come and be close to Jesus Christ. That's a goal, isn't it? It's great to be a baseball player, great to have a lot of money, great to have this marriage and whatnot, but what about this coming closer to Jesus Christ? What can the Bible tell us? And are there people in the Bible that would open the door for us to come closer to Christ? One of my favorite persons in the New Testament is that man by the name of Paul. Paul was such a good person, and he touched some of the desire that I have of sharing the Lord Jesus Christ and doing it in big ways. And I think that's why I want to be on television, because I know with that same vision of Paul as he traveled through Israel and through Greece and through Turkey and did it back and forth and up and down in a tireless way, he wanted to share the good news of Christ. And I look to him and I say, give me some of that fire, give me some of that direction, give me some of that intimate love that he has for Jesus. And so I follow, if best I can, the example of what Paul says. Now, would you come with me a little bit, and this is kind of my own little reflection, but would you allow Paul to speak to you today, to speak to you wherever you are, and that from his example, from three things that happened in Paul's life, and I'm going to share those three, doors will open for you to come to an intimate love for Christ and even start to have some of Paul's fire to spread the good news and the love of Christ even in difficult situations. Now, when we come to start talking about our friend Paul, we must remember the fact that when we first run into him, he isn't a Christian. He isn't a person who even sympathizes with Christians. He actually approves of the death of Stephen, who was one of the early Christians. And then we find him getting permission from the leadership of the Jewish people and going off to Damascus, where he wants to capture Christians and stifle them because they're going in the wrong way. They're blaspheming. They're saying that this man, Jesus, is God, and he was completely opposed to that. But something happened, and this is the road that Paul gives us. This is the direction that Paul gives us to come to Christ. And it's this beautiful encounter with Christ. I believe that Jesus is God. And I believe because of his great love for us, he longs to touch us, to draw ourselves to him. And he does that by an encounter. Now, the encounter that Paul had was very interesting. Let me read to you. I'm reading from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 9, from the Acts, verse 1. Saul kept on threatening to kill the Lord's followers. Imagine that, threatening to kill them. He even went to the high priest and asked for letters for their leaders in Damascus. He did this because he wanted to arrest and take to Jerusalem any man or woman who had accepted the Lord's way. When Saul had almost reached Damascus, a bright light from heaven suddenly flashed around him. He fell on the ground and heard a voice that said, "Saul, Saul, why are you so cruel to me?" "Who are you?" Saul said. "I am Jesus," the Lord said. "I am the one you are so cruel to. Now get up and go into the city where you will be told what to do." The men with Saul stood there speechless. They had heard the voice, but they hadn't seen anyone. Saul got up from the ground, and when he opened his eyes, he could not see a thing. Well, we know as we read longer that Paul goes, and there, after a moment of real reflection, he knows that he has encountered the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, I am firmly of the conviction that Jesus loves you, and Jesus is reaching out to you, and that no matter what direction you're going in, whether you're an atheist or whether you're an agnostic or whether you're a person of a religion that wants to push Jesus far away, I believe that Jesus, who is God, loves you. And I believe that he desires to manifest himself to you. And without even having to worry about what you're going to say or do or prepare for this, I ask you to be open to the reality of letting Jesus come into your life and say, "Why are you going in the direction you're going? Turn away and become one with me." That's the call. And maybe these words that I'm saying to you right now are enough of that call to Jesus, of Jesus, to change your life. Now is the time. Now is the time to hear that voice, the voice of God, giving you a direction in your life, giving you that force, just as Paul received it, to know, this is where I go. Go for what? For peace, yes. For happiness, yes. For a communion with God. For then a foundation of forgiveness of my sins. And then a desire to be with all of the people of God in a great way. I'm asking you to think about that, this this following of the road that St. Paul took. The road which meant I am going to be called by God to a deep surrender and commitment to the God who is Jesus in my life. Do that now. And maybe you're a person that's going to church, and maybe you're a person that's saying, oh yeah, I'm a big Christian. Now is the time to say, Jesus, I hear you, I accept you. I'm talking to you about the importance of finding people in our lives who can give us a direction. Well, just like a baseball player follows a greater baseball player to be a good player, a businessman goes to school and studies the theories of good business people. So you and I, in our desire to come to God, need to follow the example of people who have gone before us, who have allowed us to start to understand the way to give our lives completely to God. And we've looked at a person by the name of Paul, a person who was going completely in one direction, another direction, and he had an encounter with Jesus. Jesus spoke to him and called him to a deep, deep surrender of his life to him. And I've challenged you to hear my words and to allow yourself to say, no matter what's going on in your life, yes, Jesus, I accept you. I believe that you are God. I believe that you are my life, and letting this encounter, whatever it is, whether my words or whatever happens, to change your life. Now, once you accept this power of Jesus, it's not just a matter of coming and being there. There's an energizing power that happens when you say yes to God, because God is the source of who you are, and God has given you freedom to say yes or no to God. But when you say yes, you open up like a wellspring of strength and power. Wonders start to happen, first in your heart, with a sense of forgiveness, a sense of accepting being loved, and then a new understanding of the people around you. And you start to move with the fire of a desire to take this transforming experience of God and bring it to other people. And that's the real call of Paul, who after going in one direction, persecuting Christians, and then encountering Jesus and loving Jesus and accepting Jesus, now was on fire with everything he had to bring the law and the love of Jesus to other people. So what did he start to do? Well, he started to pray, and then he started to listen to the call. A person by the name of Barnabas called him out of his home and said, come and let's be evangelists. And the two of them started moving through modern-day Turkey, parts of Syria, and they were sharing the good news of Christ with great fire. But what was fascinating is the desire that they had to love and share Jesus was something that was causing a great deal of persecution. And so, if they really wanted to be followers of Christ, it wasn't just, oh yes, hey, I've got good news, everybody's happy about this. They ran into people that couldn't stand what they were doing. And Paul, because of his love of Jesus and this presence of God, becomes a wonderful example of what courage is. Courage to stand for the life and the love that only Jesus can give. And that's what he started doing. There's a town in Turkey, and it's called Lystra. And Lystra is the center of a wonderful story. He and Barnabas had come into this town. It's in present-day Turkey. And they wanted to bring about the good news. But because he had accepted that power of Jesus, that power of God, his love, Paul was now empowered through Christ to bring healing. And there's a wonderful story. Where can I find this? This story of the wonderful strength of what happens when Paul and Barnabas come into a town. And listen to this. I'm reading from the 14th chapter of Acts. In Lystra, there was a man who had been born crippled and had never been able to walk. The man was listening to Paul speak, and when Paul saw that he had faith in Jesus and that he could be healed, so he looked straight at the man and shouted, "Stand up!" The man jumped up and started walking around. Imagine that. The love of Jesus, this encounter with Jesus, this surrender of his life to Jesus, now came with a gift of Paul being empowered to reach into the lives of others and bring healing and bring cures in a powerful way. Well, the love and the power and the fire that he had was continually being tested. And in this same town of Lystra, after they had cured this man, everybody got all excited and said, "Oh my gosh, this is the god Hermes." And they said to Barnabas, "Oh, this is the god Zeus." And they wanted to sacrifice a bull in front of everyone because they thought that they were gods. And Barnabas and Paul said, "No, no, 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 we're just human beings that have been loved by God and have offered our lives to God and now are on fire with preaching that." And they're praising them. But then the scripture says that some Jews and Gentiles from outside, from Antioch and a town called Iconium, started coming, and they started turning the people of the town of Lystra against Paul. Now, remember, I'm telling you that I'm asking you to give your life to Jesus, as Paul did, to hear that call, and Jesus is giving that call and asking for surrender. And just as Paul did, say, "Yes, Lord, I give you my life." And that once you do that, feel a power, a courage comes upon you. And listen to this courage of Paul, a courage that I want in my own life. Now, there were people that came and turned the crowds against Paul and Barnabas. And at one point, some Jewish leaders from Antioch and Iconium came and turned the crowds against Paul. They hit him with stones and dragged him out of the city, thinking he was dead. Did you get that? Okay. Now, this love of Jesus and this change that happens in Paul's heart is a fire, and he desires to touch the lives of as many people as he can, even to the extent of some people wanting to kill him. Imagine if somebody walked up and you said, "I'd like to kill you." Oh God, that would so change our lives, wouldn't it? But Paul so loves Jesus that he can't be held back, and he's got to share this love of Jesus. Well, we now learn that Paul has been stoned and been killed. That's what the Bible said. He's been killed. And they drag him outside the city. The followers of Paul come around him. Listen, I'll say this. But when the Lord's followers gathered around Paul, they found that he was alive. And Paul stood up. Remember, they left him for dead, and he stands up. And I can imagine blood and scars and swelling and whatnot. And get this, this is one of my most powerful things of the Bible. He stood up and went back into the city. Can you get that? Somebody just tried to kill him, and instead of running away, he walks right back into the city. Oh, brothers and sisters, I don't know about you, but I want that. I want that fire. I want that direction. I want that meaning in my life. I want Jesus in my life. I want that love, and I want that transforming love that now empowers me to reach out and bring healing and hope to you and to the people around you and to the people I meet, and even to have the courage, oh, the courage to go against people who say, you're a fool for talking about Jesus. You're a fool for standing up where you are. And then I listen to Paul in his courage and I say, aha, that's what I want. I want a love for Jesus that's so filled with fire that you can't put me down. And we're going to share that with the world. Stay tuned. I'm going to talk to you about that fourth challenge of Paul. Christ called Paul from one direction of his life to another. And I need to be a person open to the call of Christ, speaking to me, calling me to something new. I have to be a person who's willing to now act with courage. I have to become an evangelist who's willing to work and move in the unacceptable things that happen, even with opposition, to share this love of Christ to people who don't want to even hear about that love. And we've thought about St. Paul, and we've thought about his life in Lystra and being stoned to death, and then standing up and walking right back and facing the people who had just tried to kill him. Oh, that courage is what I want. So I want to hear the call, and I also want to have the courage and the gift of that courage to share the good news. But there's a third aspect of Paul that I find very interesting. Paul, as you know, was a Jew, but also had connections with Romans, so he was a Roman citizen. And he had a wonderful access not just to Jews, but to Gentiles. Now, from all we know, that Jesus had never given an open door to Gentiles becoming followers of his, Gentiles who perhaps didn't have to go through the circumcision and the regulations of what it meant to be a Jew. But Paul comes to a challenge that if you really want to be a follower of Jesus, you might not have to follow those regulations of the Jews. And there's a meeting of the bishops and of the apostles in Jerusalem. And they come to a decision, often at the urging of Paul, who had been a missionary, to make a change, to move away from something that they were very accustomed to. This is the road of the Jewish law. This is the direction we take. And now there's a call to a freedom from that, to a freedom to not have to be circumcised. And we know that this opened the door in a big way to the Gentile world coming into Christianity. But any kind of change is tough. Anytime we move from the custom and traditions in which we live, we don't want to let go. And yet Paul gives us that road. First of all, listen to God's voice. Next, be empowered with courage to preach the good news and live it, whether you're preaching it in a church, whether you're living with your family, whether you're standing and maybe even making the sign of the cross at a meal in a public restaurant. That takes courage. But it also means being open to creative and new ways of bringing the good news of Christ to the whole world. That's what I find here in this Acts of the Apostles, an openness of the church and an openness of Paul to say, let's look at something different, maybe moving away from a custom, moving away from what we're used to a real challenge of Christ. Please, join with me, if you will, in this following of Jesus. Continue, if you will, to watch the program. Please give us a call right here at the television station. Let us know that you're there. Let us know that you're willing to support this television ministry, because it's vital. We need your help. But please also, would you write to the web page? Would you call in, and would you let us know what your prayer intentions are? I've got a whole bunch of them. Not only prayer intentions, but what you think of the show and what you think needs to be done. We want to be able to communicate with you, as I'm doing with this show, the love of Jesus, and I'm following that road of Paul. I'm listening to God's voice. I'm filled with a sense of courage, and I'm really open to something fresh and new happening to open the world. Please join with me. Allow our ministry to change the world. And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile.